Hello, everyone. This is your boy Arrow. Thanks for joining Lunar Nation. And once again, I'm joined by the two legends, Sagun and Franz. In today's episode, I would like to discuss a very important topic that we all learn in school, and that is history. So, the question we have about history is Is history written correctly? Or more importantly, is it one side over the other? Or rather, like Winston Churchill said, history is written by the victors of war. Okay, so I've been reading a lot of history. I'm very passionate about history when I was a kid. Learned a lot through, school and just a side hobby, opening books and reading on my own time. And I've come across a lot of conflicting information with history, such as like battle events. What was the scope of like the goal, and what was the goal of like the whole war, or how was it advertised? We all hear about propaganda during the war times. Hypothetically, that could be a fake news kind of realm where people get motivated to talk about something that's not really actually happened. I know, Sagun, you have a personal story about something that you would like to share with the audience.
Thanks, Arrow. Yeah, I do have a personal experience to share. So, back in the day when I was in elementary school, in history class, I was just, chilling with my textbook. And I was reading my textbook, and it said that, Buddha was born in India. I'm like, hold up, wait a minute. Is Buddha really born in India? And then I do my research, being, an analytical person like myself. I look at it and it's like, I see Buddha's born in Nepal. But in the textbooks, and my teacher's like, Buddha's born in India, and I'm like, oh no, that's false. And she was like, no, it's not. It's saying in the textbook. And I showed her the proof, and I actually changed her opinion about it. So as I want to mention is that history can be manipulated in such a way that it basically lets the winners choose how they view from their perspective of history.
Right. So, Goon, so my question to you is yes, for the most part, I believe that history is written by the victors. But the fact that, and I've done my research, it does say that um, Buddha is born in modern day Nepal. However, wouldn't they, wouldn't you say that historians or experts have categorized it? Because back then when he was born, I think it was like maybe 14, 15, 100 years ago. During that time, there was really no, country, the modern day countries that are now didn't exist
Yeah.
back then. It was either, land that was controlled by nobles, warlords, or empires. And I believe during that time, a certain area was controlled by a ancient Indian kingdom known as, I believe, the Kasala kingdom. I mean, I'm pronouncing it probably wrong, but something along those lines. So, wouldn't you say that because he was born in that kingdom and it was predominantly Indian, that he was, as far as himself, Indian, or you
No,
see
no,
what I'm saying?
no. I would say from my personal experience, he was born in Lumbini. I've actually been there. I've actually seen where he was born in the first place. And it's modern day Nepal. No matter what people say, it is exactly modern day Nepal. The location is in Nepal. So that means he was born in Nepal. That's my opinion.
Okay, so I want to get more in depth into like the issue maybe we might have in some parts of the history that we actually read. Now, what I'm coming across is sometimes, like, let's say, the history of the Native Americans, as everybody might know, is, Native Americans kind of got wiped out. And I don't think the history books, well, the general history books that's basically taught in school explicitly goes over that whole, like, genre. Well, that genre is basically saved in libraries, and you have to do independent research to figure that out, right? So what I'm thinking, it's like, sometimes history is written so broadly that they want to hide they want to hide some of the things that they don't want people to get curious about, or they intentionally don't write that so that these individuals that are reading it don't really think about it or don't even come across it. And that's what I'm finding in history books. It's like it's not too in depth. It's very macro level environment. It's always covering the scope of this, 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 but it never goes into specifics of why this led to this and where, like, what was the cause and effect, who killed who or who said what. And I believe in ancient Korea there was these like historian writers that when they were writing whatever event that was happening on that day of, they were not supposed to be interrupted by other people. And they were like the most I believe that is the most accurate history because it's not opinionated. It's not like, it's not financed by major, like, let's say, organizations that want it written this way because it would more benefit them.
Sure,
I'm not
sure.
sure, maybe
I,
Franz, you
I,
have
I
something to say.
understand. So I think that history is as accurate as this is historians recreating it, and it really depends on the historians, sources and whatnot. So I think that what it stems to is like, okay, nowadays we're able to get our history right now pretty simple because we're living in a digital age, so everything's pretty much written down. Yeah, there's some people saying this side, some people taking that side, but at the end of the day, there's a lot more information now. However, back then, I feel like a lot of people. Well, first of all, back then, a lot of people didn't even know how to read and write, so let alone pass along information. It was misconstrued. I know a lot of. If you guys remember playing that game in elementary school. Believe it's called the telephone game, where you start off
Oh
at one end and then you say a message, and then by the time it reaches all the way around the classroom, the message for the most part is going to be different because someone's going to hear it wrong, someone's going to say it wrong and whatnot. So I think the issue is back then is when they had like scriptures and scholars and writing down information. Obviously they weren't able to be at every single location every single time and jot everything down, so they relied on people's perspectives and what they saw and things of that nature. And sometimes people back then were taking information from another person that was passed down to another person, word of mouth. And by the time it got to the source that was writing it down, the story could have been fully fabricated or, written beyond belief and whatnot. And that's what was written in the history books back then, passed along to what it is now. And that's what some people, took to what it was hardcore fact.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. So, like, in our episode about yin and yang, where we found out about good and bad coexistence. So if you look at the history books, it's always like pinpointing this person's like, oh, this guy or this lady, super bad, super evil. Okay, maybe it's true, but is it? Or is it based on perspective? So
I
you know what
think
I mean?
I think it's based off perspective, right? Because it's based off people's viewpoints. So whatever that they think is, what they want to perceive to be. So whatever they think is correct is what's going to be written in the history books itself. Because they want people to be, I guess, the whole generic population to be manipulated in believing that and not showing any weakness. Let's say if they write some history book of how they were like defeated in this war or something, right? It portrays a sign of weakness, and they don't want their general population to think that they're very weak minded, people, and they're very strong and feared. And that's kind of the message that they want to send.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it could be perspective too, but I also think that whether it's a person or a nation's agenda, it also depends on the way they act upon it and what they're doing. Is it morally or ethically right? Because I understand back then a lot of nations were going to war against each other and creating acts of genocide or horrific massacres against other people. Which at the end of the day, one side would say this side was bad, the other side would say this is bad. And what were they fighting for? Were they fighting for land? Were they fighting for food? Were they fighting because one side didn't like the other? So I think sometimes we get confused, or I'd say the general population gets confused, and they like to blame the other side. But we get to see what is the purpose of a country or a nation or a person acting upon. I mean, this goes for war and just for any other reason too. And like we said, history is written by the victor. So people that would win occasions, they would write down the history for that era and make the other side look bad. But really, we got to look into perspective of you know what was going on. Was it morally or ethically right, as well as the perspective.
Yeah, you know why I think there should be like there should be people specifically who is going to write history, that there should be independent from the victors and the losers. Those are the people that should write history. And sometimes you got to be careful because some events are get tainted by, like, let's say someone who won the war. They would do something in that era, let's say in that little area that happened, and they will blame the other person, and they will make it look like that. And when it's written about it, it's kind of sometimes maybe written further than like the truth. So I we can all agree that history sometimes is true, but at the end of the day, when we're looking at it more specifically, we're understanding that there are dilemmas in between, and those dilemmas can be misinformation, and misinformation is kind of something I don't really like to read. But at the end of the day, we can't avoid it. We read it every day on social media, on news. It's just, I guess, it's human nature. But so Sagun, Franz, I'm not sure if you have any more questions about this, but I believe the audience maybe have any questions. They could probably give us a comment about this quick episode. Ask us any questions about why they think we believe like this. More importantly, thank you, audience, for joining Lunar Nation. Thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting us. And once again, subscribe, like, rate, and more importantly, comment to this episode. And more importantly, thank you for supporting us. Thank you. Bye.